Seeing Andrej Karpathy's appearance on Lex Fridman's podcast and also talking about some of the sort of takeaways in a more broader sense. In particular, some of the ideas, let's say, if you want to be good at something, try to be the best at this in the world. If you can be the best at something in the world, you will reap most of the benefits. In other words, that's what really is going to make you rich. Why am I talking about this? Is something that Naval Ravikant talks about. Eventually, uh, somebody will become the best at something and take all the benefits, the best podcast interviewer, the best AI researcher, producer of electric cars, the best producer of rockets. And the key is that whoever is the best at something will do it for the rest of the world. That's what's so powerful here. Reminds me very much of zero to one. I mean, it is actually along the lines of zero to one and the monopoly power that you have if you're producing something for the rest of the world. But again, this is a two-leveled episode here. One, I want to just discuss Karpathy's appearance in general, my thoughts on him, and then also talk a little bit about this concept of monopolizing a field, productizing, as Naval calls it, and becoming the best at something and then reaping most of the benefits. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's November 3rd, 2022. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is up 15 basis points. The market's down 30 basis points. For the year, we are down 48.4%. The market is down 20%. We're underperforming by 28.4%. The main underperformance is macro-driven. Powell yesterday stated at the FOMC meeting that he expects rates to potentially rise a bit slower, but eventually have a higher level. So some sort of a higher plateau. Question that the market is asking themselves is, of course, how fast, how high, and when will it stop? Those are the big questions, and the answers are we don't know yet, but we expect a higher plateau because the economy is it is slowing down in many sectors, but not everywhere, and inflation is not abating. So that really is what's going on. And our view at Orange Capital Partners is that people just need to go back to work, particularly the remote work sort of pandemic has created a massive real wage increase because productivity has come down drastically and wages have stayed the same, and that's just the way that's just the way it is, and we'll see. This is obviously an episode on its own. Can the Fed really engineer a change in attitudes away from this pandemic related? And by the way, pandemic was a pun, of course. I'm sorry for that. What I meant with the pandemic of remote work is just this sort of infectious idea that you can stay home, work from home, and do the same job. You can't. It's just very much more difficult for companies to deliver the same types of products and services at the same scale, at the same price, at the same speed, at the same level of innovation. I mean, innovation particularly is probably not even going to happen. With remote work, innovation is almost an oxymoron because innovation only happens when people disagree, when people change their attitudes and opinions, and in remote work settings, it's very transactional, and therefore it's very difficult to change processes. And I think all this disease that corporations had for decades, committees and meetings, are just going to be exacerbated through remote work. So there's only one way for companies to get back to growth and innovation and disruption and value for money, and that is to have people back in person, face to face, talking, exchanging ideas, fighting verbally, of course, and getting the excuse me, I was just driving, somebody almost killed somebody here. So again, so remote work is the main problem. It needs to stop. I don't know if the Fed can do it, but this is the risk that the economy is exposed to. Our exposure with Tesla is in particular also China. Xi Jinping has clearly stated that he wants to go back to a more Maoist type policy. We expect at Orange Capital Partners that sooner or later China, the Tesla China business will become at least much less valued than it is today, just because the Chinese government will start nationalizing it, maybe in a creeping way, but it will still happen. So that's bad news, but it is what it is. We have to live with reality. And the good news is that we have many more factories coming up, and the growth is going to continue. And actually, the silver lining here is that the only reason we thought that Tesla should have gone to China in the first place is to compete with China. And that is obviously off the table because China is not going to be a serious competitor with this type of totalitarian policy that Xi Jinping is pursuing. So the competition is falling off. The threat from Chinese competition is falling off, but then also the market is falling off. So it's not a wash. We will lose a couple $100 billion in market cap, but over time, I hope that this will become less and less impactful. Now let's talk about the actual topic of this episode. It's a conversation that Andrej Karpathy had with Lex Fridman. Andrej Karpathy, the former head of AI at Tesla, a very impressive person for many reasons. I think it's really more the feel that he is able to transpire than the actual what he's doing. What he's doing is also amazing. He's built an incredible AI institution at Tesla. He's helped build the autopilot, which is by far the best ADAS system right now, and that within 5 years, and having had to compete with many companies and a lot of technology and engineers and all of that have been doing this for a long time. So he's really shown, I think, in real time how good he is at what he does. What he's doing right now is, just to be clear, he left Tesla and he's doing several things. And one of the things he's doing is he's offering lectures on YouTube about backward propagation and also language models. So he's helping hands-on people build language models from scratch using Python. And I'm doing actually the courses I started. I've done about 4 or 5 hours worth of coursework right now. And it's very useful in 2 ways. One, you actually do hands-on programming, and in second, it's also going really back to the basics and trying to understand, let's say, what is a derivative and why does it matter let's say in a backward propagation model. And then, he's showing you how to use, let's say, PyTorch, so you don't actually have to do the derivation of an exponential function or these types of things. In PyTorch, there's this really amazing function where you just do, dot backward brackets, and then it backward propagates throughout the mathematical expression that you're using, in other words, throughout your neural net. So those types of things are being done, shown, and you for anybody who is interested in these things, highly recommend it. But Karpathy is a lot more than just a teacher. He's a very interesting person for many ways, and I'm going to transition later into Naval Ravikant's sort of wisdom, if you want, for lack of a better word, or the philosophical expressions that he's using, such as eventually, you got to productize yourself and become the best at something in the world, and then also reap all the benefits. In other words, that's how you become rich. And all of those things, they all apply to Karpathy. And what's really interesting about Karpathy, and this applies to all artists and pretty much anybody that I know who's done anything important, he doesn't talk about success or money or fame, none of that stuff, but he has all of it. And why? Because he is focused on the product. He's focused on this actual substrate, which is, what am I actually doing? And this is the first thing that I took away from this conversation, is that he really is passionate about what he's doing, and he's very good at what he's doing. He believes in the 10,000 hour thing. I personally disagree with that. I think we're a little bit better than that as humans. We're not one-shot learners, but we're also not 10,000 hour learners. The 10,000 hour thing is a little bit depressing because it puts kind of a fixed cost on anything. So in order to do something, you have to first spend a couple of years doing it. I find that in some sense that's true. We have to go to college, learn things, but I feel like with time, at least with age, there is a lot more cross-learning, transfer learning, and faster shot learning than the 10,000 hour thing. But nevertheless, I guess where I agree with Karpathy is that you really have to dig deep. You have to dig deep, understand the field, and then continuously expose yourself. This second thing, which is very much a takeaway I got from him, and that's I would say an Elon Musk feature, which is that you've got to iterate. You've got to iterate. You can't just do a zero. You can't have a 0 and 1 function in what you do. In other words, you do something for 5 years and then hopefully it works. That's not how life works. That's not how innovation works. That's not how disruption works. We've said that many times in this podcast. For us, disruption really is driven by iteration. Disruption is The cost of iteration, the cost of error correction, all of these things that drive disruption are key to disruption. You cannot have disruption if you don't iterate, if you don't error correct fast. So in other words, you want to build an organization that has all these Popperian features, that you can iterate fast, that you can error correct at low cost. Hopefully you make less errors also, but that's not even that important. What's a lot more important is to be able to error correct faster and in sort of a way that doesn't, bet the farm or kill you or something like that. So having said that, let's talk about other aspects of Karpathy. So what I find really amazing is also his ability to express complex situations, complex uh, um, uh, things in a very sort of intuitive way. For example, he would say, like, why did we take away sensors in the car? Well, we took away sensors in the car because we're reducing entropy. Every sensor we add to the car is increasing complexity, cost, maintenance, failure, debugging, all of these things. You have to think of it as a system and not just, oh, we took away radar or we took away ultrasound. If you look at it from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense and it becomes less political and less charged, like a lot of other things around this Tesla autopilot are very politically charged. You need LiDAR, you need this, you need that. And the people in the sensor fusion community, which come out of the sort of DARPA challenge, so this whole slew of engineering talent, which is working particularly for companies like Cruise and Waymo, they are very political about this because it's not just about, okay, Tesla is using less sensors. It's also kind of validating the Tesla approach and then also kind of devalidating the other approach. So that's why it's so political. But anyway, Karpathy has this really down-to-earth, clear, short, concise way of explaining things. Another thing he said, which impressed me, is he's a big fan of the humanoid robot of Tesla, and he said, well, it makes a lot of sense to design a humanoid robot because the world is designed for humans, and therefore a robot will be much better in terms of interacting with the world, and interacting with the world is really what intelligence is all about. Now, this is not exactly what, let's say, Naval Ravikant would say. Naval Ravikant defines intelligence as you get out of the world what you want. In order to do that, though, you have to kind of find a congruent reality. So you can't be, your reality cannot be detached from the actual reality too far, otherwise you're not going to get what you want. So in that sense, intelligence, as the way Naval defines it, is number one, understanding what you want and getting it, so being smart enough to actually get it. But second, also, you have to be smart enough to understand reality so you can apply your wants to reality. So these are the two things, a little bit different than what, let's say, somebody like Karpathy would say, because also Karpathy works, I guess, at lower levels in the stack. In other words, he's still working on problems that are, let's say, driving or lifting things, sorting things. That's what the humanoid robot will be doing. So those are problems that are a little bit less complex, less intense than maybe what Naval Ravikant is talking about when he's talking about intelligence. But nevertheless, let's get back to Karpathy. I think another very impressive thing is, an interesting, actually, he's very similar to me. He's very interested in biology, in cell and DNA knowledge. So sort of he's interested in the biology stack, and he's reading books. One of them, Nick Lane, actually, he recommended, so I'm going to read one or maybe two of his books. Interesting there, I think, two things. One, that he's actually pursuing sort of similar paths like me. So thinking about the stack in different areas, biology, compute, and crypto. And he's not talking about crypto, but he's talking about language models and about how maybe language models can be used to define what a human is and what not a human is, which kind of applies to Twitter. So I can see where his thinking is a little bit, or pretty congruent, actually, with Elon Musk's thinking, and that's probably just because he's worked with the man so long that they have some sort of either telepathy, or he's just reading about what Musk's doing with Twitter, and now he's thinking, okay, I could have a solution for you. He, by the way, said that he would be interested in coming back to Tesla to work on AGI, so those are very, very positive comments from his side. But I guess the other thing I wanted to mention in the context of the biology stack is, like I said, It's really interesting the way he thinks about the stack and how he feeds the world to the stack. I just had a recent podcast episode where that I named Stack Thinking, because I think once you look at the world through stack lenses, it becomes compartmentalized, and when you compartmentalize the world, you can solve problems at different levels and therefore be a lot more efficient. I think that's part of what he meant with what Naval means with intelligence, which is really get from the world what you want, but for that you need to understand the world and then also be very good at solving problems within the stack. So I think Karpathy shares that with me, and I think that's a very smart way to approach the world. I think another important thing I wanted to mention is that he's not a very techie person. So there's this like don't get high on your own supply thing. He himself, of course, a highly technical person that produces lots of interesting technology, but he doesn't consume it as much. And this is something that applies in general, of course, to Silicon Valley. If you drive around Silicon Valley, you won't see too many futuristic buildings. People, yeah, they drive Teslas, but people sit in coffee shops and restaurants. They're not obsessed with their phones. It's a pretty laid-back community here. People like horses and hiking and surfing and skiing. So it's kind of like, certainly it's not, you're not in Aspen here or in Montana, but it has a bit of that feel. Of course, it's very urban also and very academic, particularly in the Palo Alto area. But again, it's this interesting, don't get high on your own supply type of culture that also Karpathy transcends. So now let's shift gears a little bit. Why did I think about Naval Ravikant's comments about eventually you're going to become the best at something in the world and reap all the profits? And this is really the recipe for getting rich. I think Karpathy encompasses that recipe. And I want to add another person that I have spent time recently thinking about, which is Rick Rubin, a legendary producer. And Rubin says many, many times that in his own story is like, you really, really can't plan. Or in other words, you plan and God laughs. Planning is not very, very smart strategy. It is good in certain areas, but overall, when it comes to your life, planning typically doesn't get you far. What gets you far is all the other, the 0 to 1 stuff, or I want to call it the Karpathy stuff. The 0 to 1 stuff is just simply, listen, find your niche and then obsess with it. That's Karpathy. And don't bother what others think about it. Don't bother what the consensus is or any of that stuff. Just relentlessly pursue what you think is the right thing to do for yourself, because it's you and your own expression of whatever, you are the function. And Karpathy says he kind of sees the world, the meaning of life and all of that is maximizing argmax your function. But you are the function, you're the transformation. You, meaning you are a person that transforms input into output. And you're very unique. That transformation function is very unique. If you want, this is also sort of a Gödel, Escher, Bach type of thing where, what am I? I'm a transformation function. Stuff goes in, stuff goes out. And whatever goes into me, it's going to come out, but it's going to be different than what goes into somebody else. And everybody has that ability to produce something. Everybody has that ability to, that's by definition. By definition, we're all transformation functions. So stop trying to be like other people. Stop trying to copy other people. It's futile. Find your way, and then relentlessly pursue. This is what Rick Rubin says. He's a very encouraging person when it comes to that. He's very cutthroat in terms of deciding what's good and bad. As a producer, I'm sure he said no to many, many more bands than he said yes to, but that's fine, that's his job. But still, he's a very positive person and very encouraging when it comes to pursue your own thing. So he's a very sort of 0 to 1 Pitathelian approach. He uses a Pitathelian approach towards excellence, which is you got to be very unique. You got to be the more extreme, the better. Now you have to have a lot of performance metrics that work, and otherwise it just doesn't work. But that's okay. Again, that's fine. That's fine. potentially what defines intelligence is sort of in a Rick Rubin type of way. Now, having said all of these things, now where do we stand when it comes to all of this? Karpathy, Naval, what exactly are we talking about? Well, I would say the following. I think Andrej Karpathy is one of those rare human beings that can explain in a human way very complex relationships, patterns, concepts. That makes him very useful. That's why he's very good at working for a company like Tesla. That is what Tesla is. So that's a good thing. Naval's saying that eventually you will become the best at something in the world and reap all the profits. That's a very 0 to 1 type approach to the world that I share. And I think the relationship between Naval, Peter Thiel, Rick Rubin, and Karpathy is that you have an excellence which is driven by obsession and passion, but you also have a human aspect to it. I find that so amazing. The difference between Karpathy and Vitalik Buterin is Vitalik is not very human. He comes across like an android. And although he's built something amazing, he's an android. He reminds me of the guy who developed C++. Again, very amazing, very good. But it's not a wealth creation type thing. Wealth is created, at least right now, in the world with humans, by humans. And that's what's so powerful about Karpathy. So to summarize, the Lex Fridman appearance of Andrej Karpathy was very impressive. I really liked the way he talks about complex things, like he says, the world is designed for humans, therefore the humanoid robot makes a lot of sense. Or we take away sensors from the car in order to make the car less complex and reduce entropy, which increases the scalability and reduces cost. Those are very positive, hopeful things from my perspective. I also see the connection between Karpathy and Naval Ravikant and the Naval statement that you will become eventually the best at something. In the case of, I think in the case of Karpathy, he will be the best in the world for developing computer vision. So he will do it for everybody. Like he will do it for the world. Like this segmentation that we used to have, that somebody in China does it for the Chinese and somebody in Europe for the Europeans, that's gone. We're a connected, fully connected world, and one person will do it, or one company or one group of people will do it for everybody in the world. So this is the 0 to 1 approach to business and the world and wealth creation, and we at Orange Capital Partners subscribe to that. And we're very hopeful that in the recent developments, particularly in AI, in crypto, and in CRISPR, there is so much potential for such groups to emerge that can solve these types of problems for the rest of the world and therefore generate wealth. Thank you.